We're very lucky to have some panelists here to discuss deployments of compute on the edge. And so I'm excited about this session to really understand what's currently happening today and what we think is going to be happening in the future and how we're managing it. And so I'll let our panelists here introduce themselves.
I'm Ron Sachs. I'm with Prov.net. We're a small regional multi-tenant data center service provider in the New England market, mostly Providence, Rhode Island, and Boston area.
Hi, I'm Todd Traver. I'm with Uptime Institute, VP of IT Optimization and Strategy. Prior to that, I was with IBM, responsible for data center strategy there. So, I'm very interested in this topic, interested in hearing what the other panelists have to say. But, this is definitely an area of focus for us and the industry in general. So, this will be a good discussion.
Great.
Hi, I'm Leonard Francis. I'm the Associate Director of IT Operations at Weill Cornell Medical. I'm responsible for data center, disaster recovery and business continuity, and IT operations. We have just recently, probably in the past year and a half, rebranded. We were formerly Weill Cornell Medical College, but we've become much more than just a college. We are very actively involved in research, heavily involved in research, in clinical, and of course, the college continues.
Okay, great. So we have an excellent cross-section from hosting co-location to medical end user and the Uptime Institute with experience at IBM. So this is great. So this is a general question. I'll start off for each of you to kind of answer it. Is so edge computing is a current buzzword. Probably heard it too many times in this particular conference. What do you see in your particular business, this trend? How is it affecting your business? So we'll go ahead and start with Ron.
It's been a buzzword, a evolving buzzword for, I think, the last 12, 24 months. And if you look back even further, I think we saw the beginnings of it even earlier than that. The way we're looking at it from a service provider perspective is kind of in the classic what we refer to as the classic three no's. What we know about it, what we know we don't know about it, and what we don't know about it. And we know that it appears to be a trend because of physical laws like velocity and volume and the need for that in terms of data, either data at rest or data in motion, to drive proximity. So to achieve the types of volume and the types of velocity that you need to create these edge environments from a proximity point of view to accomplish the velocity and the volume that you're attempting. If you look at Netflix, they're the most commonly cited example of having lots of downstream volume and the need to cache that at quote-unquote the edge. If you look way back, or not way back, but in the way we measure time in this industry, if you look back a few years at the New York Stock Exchange co-location, they put that there because of velocity reasons, because of high-frequency trading. So the whole idea of edge and proximity to achieve both velocity and speed, kind of goes back that far. So that fits into the no category as we're trying to think about deployment. What we know we don't know primarily is where really is the edge. Is the edge some regional site? Is the edge in the trunk of some autonomous vehicle? It's really not well defined yet, and we know we don't know where it's defined. And by not knowing that, it makes any thinking about deploying the edge, and we're thinking a lot about deploying multiple edge facilities, it makes it very difficult to determine what those requirements are going to be and where that edge is. Do you have a hardened site? Do you have a micro site? What is it and where does it have to go and what are the requirements for it? And we don't know the applications that are going to drive that from a service provider perspective. And then what we don't know, we don't know, we don't know. It's really that simple. But I've been around this particular industry for 30-something years, and I have gone through a few conferences like this over that period of time. And what I always, I'm never really surprised at it anymore, but what we're talking about in terms of defining the edge today, just like we tried to define the cloud 10 years ago, or even earlier than that, it really kind of does turn out to be a good bit of difference from what we think it is today. And that all is based upon the new technologies and the new applications and the new use cases of a capability. So as we look at deployments, we're really trying to put it into those three categories. And I guess the best way to describe our approach to it is to proceed with caution and slowly to try to make sure that we fit what we're doing as a service provider into that those three concentric circles, if you will.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I mean, what Uptime Institute does is we're an advisory organization as well as we do certifications of the physical building as well as the processes, the human procedures. And so, what this is, the changes it's bringing for us in our business is we meet with customers, and in the past, the focus was on the primary data center, but now more and more compute is off moving to the edge. So now we're working with the customers to understand really from the entire stack, this Gordian knot of everything from the application to the network to the IT kit to the building it operates in. It used to be in one place largely. Now it's disaggregated. It's everywhere. The applications are everywhere. And so working with the customers to understand, how do you plan for resiliency in that environment? Right. So if I had to net this out, it's working with the customers to plan for resiliency and reliability. Like they looked at tier 1, 2, 3, 4 data centers in the past. How do you come up with an equivalent of that for an application? Right. So really so we're working with 451 on this, really expanding our offerings into that area. But that's the question of the day is the edge is definitely very much part of the data center, even though it's not physically there. Right. That's where your compute is, that's where the data is. And so you need to plan it as if it were a data center.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we'll potentially start seeing more messaging around how you evaluate edge sites for the resiliency and
assessing it in aggregate, right? So you look at the edge sites itself, which really needs to have the same thought process and thoroughness of planning that a major data center does. And then aside from that, you need to plan it all together. You still have a data center, but now you have these edge sites as well, and you need to plan it as a whole at the application level. So that's where I see the challenge.
Okay, great.
Yeah, similar to I think what Todd just mentioned. We at Weil, and I'll just say for myself, I was very happy living in my little space, right, in my data center, and because I had a great deal of control over that space. But because, as I mentioned, Weil has 3 pillars that that are important to them, and research really has pushed us further along to look outside of the data center because the requirements for their processing and their needs in terms of they need to have their data very close to where they are. And I think at times they're also, they like to have immediate access to their equipment. That's kind of adjusted the way we think about data center. And so we've had to figure out a way of being able to be closer to where they're at, giving them access as much as we feel comfortable giving, because we still feel that we have that need to secure that data somehow. So our customers have pushed us to go further from our comfort zone. And so we continue, I think, looking at ways to be able to deliver on those requirements, which is a major part of what we do, right, in terms of the research function.
So you kind of led into the second point I wanted to ask is, what applications are really driving this? And so research is a key one, it sounds like, for you, where they want physically the applications in the same building or office space that they're working in? Or?
Yeah, I mean, we've had it down to where they want to be in the same room with their equipment, right? So, and it's because, you know, they are, the amount of data and the data processing that's occurring, the speed at which it's happening. Their requirements are oftentimes very, I want to say, different than the standard user, right? So, and like I said, you know, they have a need for control of not only the equipment but the data itself, and they like to, I think, I heard someone say in a different session where, you know, you could kind of hug your equipment. Well, they have that need as well. Yeah. So, and you know, as being someone who has kind of grown up in data center space, we would prefer you not hug your equipment, right? So, yeah, that has really, you know, pushed us. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any within your portfolio of customers? Is there any other particular ones outside of research that's driving it?
Well, we definitely are. We have administrative departments that they're very active in video and other type of streaming data, and they say, well, you know, the link that you're providing us might not be enough for what we need, for what we want to do. Mm-hmm. You know, the limiting factor is not only, or the driving factor is not only that the users have, you know, what they're doing, but also your infrastructure sometimes can't keep up, right? And so that might require you to push it to the edge a little bit further than you'd want to.
So the cost of trying to provide the right amount of bandwidth or whatever you need exceeds the I don't know, inconvenience of placing the compute there?
Exactly,
okay.
Exactly.
Okay. And then from a service provider perspective, do you know of any of your clients that are coming to your sites in particular because of where you are regionally and things like that?
Yeah, so in looking at it today, we're seeing a couple things. From a service provider perspective, the actual compute footprint is getting smaller, and the actual bandwidth and robustness of the network connectivity that is required of us is growing larger. So, you know, it used to be multi-cabinets with a small amount of bandwidth, and now it's single cabinets with give us as much bandwidth as you possibly can, and give us the exchange or interconnectivity capability that you have. So our locations are primarily urban and near urban environments where there is a significant amount of fiber, dark fiber capacity and lit fiber capacity coming into our facilities. We have traditionally converted old carrier class facilities into data centers. So as a result, there's, I'll call it legacy connectivity and fiber optic capability, but it's not so legacy. It's pretty effective stuff. But to the other drivers, it's pretty clear from a service provider perspective. You know, as we're looking out to the future, trying to go to where the puck's going to be, not where it is today. You know, we're fog computing and the Internet of Things and the growth of machine-to-machine communication that we're expecting to see happen. And, you know, having come through this conference, apparently is going to be even happening faster than we all thought. You know, we see that very much as a primary driver of this edge capability going forward. And again, back to you know, the Netflix and the New York Stock Exchange Colo, they were just kind of the precursors, the early pioneers that more out of necessity, being the motherhood of invention, you know, built out those kind of edge capabilities. We think, you know, fog, it's as clear as fog is what I like to say. And the Internet of Things is really going to be a real key driver going forward.
So, you know, it's interesting. Are you trying to evaluate if you were to expand and try to support this trend or these type of applications, like where and how big would you want to put a facility for clients? Is that some of the things that are going through?
Yeah, so in fact, the where question, in every session I sat in, I asked that question. Where are you putting these? Where are you thinking of putting these? I think the how big is, again, kind of what I referred to earlier as to what we know we don't know. As we think of edge, we really do think of it also in a couple concentric circles. You know, the ultimate edge literally could be a micro data center and an autonomous vehicle driving up Route 95.
Yeah.
And that could be the edge, or the edge, and therefore it's a, you know, a 200-pound data center collecting real high velocity data from all the sensors on the car and the car around it, and that's where you put it. Or it could be a local facility, 2,000 square foot, that's taking some of that data, and that data doesn't require the same amount of velocity. So you could have 100 of those within, you know, 10 square miles, and then you could have another aggregation point that's kind of within a 25-mile radius, acting as a 4,000 square foot data center. So it's really one of the perplexing problems for us, is we're trying to exactly figure out that the answer to that question is, you know, what level of edge do you want to play on, and what level of edge as a service provider providing co-location and or other data center services, where do you put it? What does it look like? What are the resiliencies? What are the, you know, do some of them have to have 2n+1? Do some of them just have to be generator only? Do some of them, you know, if they fail, who cares? You know, the car crashes. So that all has to kind of be determined to kind of figure out the where.
Yeah.
And you don't want to get into too much of a science project and get too far out in front of the market.
Right, right. So Todd, you know, you consulted with I'm sure a lot of different companies out there. I mean, today, what are you seeing from edge applications?
Yeah, we're seeing more and more companies putting things on the edge, and I think, you know, it's the technology is just allowing it. You know, the applications are more portable, so they can do things on the edge that they couldn't do before. You know, they do it for all the reasons that were mentioned, you know, high bandwidth and all that. But some of the applications, I mean, what we're seeing is the only place they will run really is on the edge. Yeah. So I'm guessing, like the VR application the other day that was presented here. Right. I mean, the only way that can run is basically as local as you can get. And local like that is on the edge, you know, if you're running out of a major data center. So we're seeing more and more of it, and I'm sure that's going to continue. I mean, the 5G and the self-driving cars, I mean, that's going to be huge. So there's certainly a lot of compute occurring and data storage, you know, as well at the edge. But, you know, more than anything, it's you know, it's bandwidth, it's networking, and so it's a you know, a network hub on steroids, and now that you're able to move compute there, people are, and really just leveraging, you know, the new technologies. So yeah, it's definitely, we're seeing a lot more of it than we saw in the past.
Yeah. Okay. So question for Leonard. So my expectation is, so now if there is a bit more compute being kind of driven out to the edge, right, where there may or may not be support people, you know, may or may not be easy to get to. You know, what's going through your mind with regards to how you manage it, deploy it with as efficiently as you can?
So that's funny you asked that question, because as I was driving in, I was thinking exactly about this. You know, when I arrived at Weill Cornell probably about 2.5 years ago, we started to shift our model to try to go towards a 24/7 on-site. You know, I thought that was a good direction to go in. But for whatever reason, we kind of scaled that back, and now that, you know, this whole edge compute discussion is happening, and the researchers are kind of pushing us out. We also have clinical offices that are coming up that are having some of these discussions. All of a sudden, you know, the thought is, well, how are we going to support these environments, right? So. My team specifically, recently, we've taken on the responsibility of when there's some sort of outage or work or whatever ongoing operational work that needs to happen, we are going to go on site. But sometimes that site is anywhere from Westchester to, you know, to Queens, to the outer boroughs, to, it's, you know, it's pushed us pretty far that now we have to think about this as we're starting to, you know, I don't want to say that we have, you know, we dipped our toe into the water, but, you know, we might have like half a foot in.
Yeah.
And we have to figure out, you know, how is it that we're going to handle this type of transition that's happening. So definite challenge.
Yeah, what can and can't you do currently remotely? What can you do remotely, and what do you have to have a person on site for right today, and what do you want it to be?
So, you know, we implemented some of the APC Schneider technology so that we can manage our power and cooling and all of that stuff remotely. We were able to also implement like rack level, dual-factor authentication at the rack level to allow people access to their cabinets, and so we were able to manage a lot of stuff remotely. However, if you have an outage, right, you need someone there, right? There's not that you just cannot get around. But what, you know, at times what that means is you have to look at your support contracts. You have to look at, you know, your relationships with the building and the people who manage the building and your facilities and your, you know, engineering and maintenance teams. It becomes a collective effort rather than, in my perfect world, I would have a 24/7 team. I'd have, you know, 12 to 15 people on my staff. I can do all of that, but it's not a perfect world oftentimes. So you have to have those relationships. You have to have the contracts in place. You have to augment all of it to make sure you're able to address it.
Okay, that's interesting. So you kind of have a dotted line extended team to kind of fill out what you might need on site for some situations.
Yeah, you know, we have really a great relationship with our engineering and maintenance teams.
Yeah.
And they have relationships with electricians and whoever else for some of those other sites. We also have very close relationship with New York Presbyterian, who's here today, because we have some shared space, so we work closely with them as well. So you have to use the people you know sometimes, and so that's how we manage that.
Okay, great. Now, from a service provider perspective, I think it's more of an interesting or different question to ask about, remote management, how much staff you need, if you think you're going to get remote sites, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, both from the service provider perspective as well as from the user perspective, because the world, much like computing changed a few decades back from centralized to distributed environment, it's kind of the same problem.
Yeah.
How do you? It was as Leonard suggested. He was feeling pretty good having everything in a centralized place, all under his control, where he could, have that one throat to choke inside that facility. But just like computing went from that centralized environment to a distributed compute environment, so now goes the data center, so to speak. And it's going from, a big monolithic centralized data center where most of the time you have the resources you need to address issues, to now this globally distributed portfolio and amalgamation that enterprises as well as service providers are going to have to figure out how to manage. From the small service provider perspective, we've been thinking about what our capacity is to help that management. And simply put it, yes, we can be the local remote hands, but we also think about that from a geographic dispersion point of view. Is how far can we go? What is that? A 25-mile radius, a 50-mile radius? So that when we get the call from Cornell to say, go out and swap this out for that, right? We can get there within some SLA arrangement. So we think what's going to happen is there may or may not be further consolidation of this distributed world out there. Most likely will be consolidation. but we think there'll be kind of the managed service providers and the edge data center service providers that are more local and more distributed, more autonomous, will come together in some form of affiliations.
Okay.
And organizations that, if you think about the old broadcast networks, the CBS affiliates, the ABC affiliates, and because the only way a buyer like Cornell can buy is, they can't, or Netflix, they can't go out and negotiate a contract with 6,000 edge data centers and 5,000 local service providers. It just would be a very difficult thing. So I think there's going to be some new organizing mechanism around the service provider market that kind of forces us all into someone can buy a national or even a global contract to help pull all that together.
Yeah, that's interesting. So we're a little bit over our 1 o'clock, but we did start late. One kind of was a bigger last question here for Todd before we take questions. So what does the industry have to do in order, if this goes to where we think it's going to go? What do you think the industry has to do to make it successful and reliable and efficient?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, from what I've seen, is it needs to be thought through, really from the application. I mean, that's what's being supported. And so it's really just taking a holistic view of this, all of the things that are linked together, and being able to plan that out. So that's the thing that we're not seeing completely yet. In as much as you have all of these application providers saying, oh, don't worry, it's active, it rolls over. If you look at these websites that track outages on the web, I mean, there are hundreds, thousands of outages every day. Small ones, but outages. So the point is that I think it needs to be thought through. The resiliency needs to be planned really more holistically than it is today. Today, they plan the data center really well. When we've met with the customers, they just said, oh, don't worry, the software will roll over. Anything is running in, on the edge. And most of the time that's true, but sometimes not. So they need to think through, how do they support them? How do they ensure, end-to-end, reliability, resiliency?
And it sounds almost application by application.
It is.
It could require different
right.
infrastructure almost.
And then, what you or I would envision is one big, shopping application is really hundreds of little applications under the covers. Some are at the edge, some are not. Yeah. And it's the overall planning. So what I see the need is like the enterprise architect, the applications architect needs to work with really, I'll say almost the facilities folks, and the network folks to tie all this together, because they've all kind of operated separately. The facilities folks, whether it's the big data center or the little one, oh yeah, don't worry, it's reliable. The IT folks, same thing. They'll swear by the kit that they put in there, but they don't really talk. But ultimately, it's the application that needs to be planned across all of that. So I would net it out. It needs to be planned, okay, in aggregate, holistically, and with the application being the focus.
Okay,
yeah.
Interesting. Thank you. I think what I'll do is, I believe our end time was 1 o'clock. Is that correct? So I'll open it up now for any questions. Okay. Okay. Great. So, any comments? Summary comments from our panelists here.
No, I think the only thing I'd say is the last time Todd and I were on stage together was in 1975 in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Jeez.
We both graduated the same high school on that same stage on that same day, and we didn't know that until about 15 minutes ago. Right? So it was quite an epiphany for both of us. So just shows you how old we really are.
That's right. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. No, but you're right. But to that point, I mean, I see this as really exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, because data centers, have kind of gotten a little boring. It's like, how many chiller plants can you replace? Yeah. And you fine tune this or that. But this is kind of, I wouldn't say turn things upside down, but inside out probably. And so, I mean, it'll be really interesting going forward. And some of the VR stuff and the self-driving cars. I mean, I just think. It's going to be a really exciting place to be for the next, decade. Yeah. Well, probably forever, but at least for me, the next decade.
Yeah, and I feel, when you look at that whole consolidation trend that really happened 5 years ago to try to get control over all this crazy stuff that was happening out on the sites, and now we're talking already about stuff that's already going to be on the edge, is that we have to really be smart about how it's deployed and managed, that it's very easy.
You betcha.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
And, Leonard.
For me, the only experience I have with Poughkeepsie is that I used to live nearby there. There you go, a little bit further north, yeah. No, but you know what? I think that as much as I stated that, I loved being in my comfortable space, I do agree with Todd that it is very exciting, I think, that we're going and looking beyond the traditional data center, right? I think that there are, and for us, like, as I stated, the consumer is pushing us into a space that we're not comfortable with. But it is forcing us to think about things that we never had to think about. We never had to think about physical security outside of our space, and we never had to think about how we're going to secure that data, and we never had to think about the power and cooling in office, right? Because that was already taken care of for us in a data center.
Right.
So the resiliency piece and all of that is, those are areas that we're thinking about today. But I think it's going to allow us to deliver much better service to our users.
Okay.
Yeah, so it is exciting, it's challenging, but I think that we're going to see some really great things happen.
Great. All right, very good. Thank you. Any questions from the audience? Looks like we got a microphone here.
It work? Yes, it does. Thank you.
There we go.
Yeah, we can take questions to the floor.
So you guys talked about resiliency. Is there a trend for infrastructure resiliency in the edge? Is it leaning towards a lower resiliency for infrastructure for the cooling and the power? Meaning, is it going to be more of a tier 2, or what are you guys seeing as far as the trend for the infrastructure?
Yeah, well, I mean, it needs to be planned out. I mean, and I'll say, it depends, computer answer, on the application. But, I will say that more and more of the things that are put on the edge are more important than ever. And the edge is also, a pretty hostile place, or can be. I mean, as opposed to a regular data center, you typically have your own dedicated substation or two, and, you have pretty good control of the power. These smaller edge compute facilities, you may need, more physical resiliency in the bricks and mortar and the infrastructure. I mean, everything is tied together, and everything is risk management. And so, to avoid having to exercise the software failover more frequently, it may be for some people, it may make sense to, put the same level of rigor and hardening into an edge data center as your regular data center. Or if the application truly isn't that necessary and can have an outage, maybe not. So I guess my only statement would be, yeah, maybe. From a bricks and mortar perspective, I think they could probably use a lot of help with resiliency, electrically, mechanically, cooling, security for sure. But it'll all tie back to the application. That's where I think the conversation needs to take place between the people that are running the facility and the applications folks to really make a conscious decision. Because I think some people today are kind of defaulting into this. They don't even know who to talk to, so they just kind of put things on the edge, and then, oops, that shouldn't have happened. So there needs to be better planning, but they could use resiliency.
Yeah, some of the things that I've seen out there people do is, like retail locations that tend to not operate when the power is out. Those tend to be like tier 1-ish, 2-ish, with a single path and not really redundant cooling because it's relying. Other places where maybe it's a little more critical, if the load's low enough, the cooling kind of gets away with, maybe either the room or the single, but they might have 2 power paths. So those are some of the I've seen on the edge, but I think we'll probably see a lot more attention paid to this in the coming years because, you're just finding stuff that it doesn't seem, it's maybe 1,000, 1 kW a load, but if it goes down, it's a big deal.
Right, exactly.
So I think it'll be interesting next few years.
So if I could just add one other point to that, and and this is more of my DR and business continuity hat. going on and say that, as we're moving into that edge, it is important to keep in mind that you want to take a look at the application, you want to take a look at the user and the criticality of all of it, and look at your DR and business continuity plans, right? And try to figure out, because that'll also, drive you on some of those decisions, right, of what you need to do to make sure that it is resilient, or maybe you can get away with just having a UPS in there that, might run for a short period of time. But I would just throw that out there as well.
Great.
Any more questions? Don't be shy.
Great.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you.